Now, we felt that we would like to, the last time when we were here, we had the gentleman from British Columbia who, reflecting on the whole process of deliberative democracy as in his country. And there was very positive reaction to that on the Sunday morning. And somewhat equivalent, we thought we would introduce somebody today to you to give a reflection on the broad issue of some of the issues of the Irish diaspora. And the person that we chose, and a particularly appropriate person, is Tim O'Connor. Tim is a long-standing, or was a long-standing public servant. He served in the Department of Foreign Affairs in a number of different postings. He worked on Northern Ireland. He was head of the he did a lot of work in the lead up to the Good Friday Agreement, and he was head of the North-South Secretariat for a number of years after the Good Friday Agreement. He was then Irish Consul General in New York, where he did an outstanding job. He came back from there, and he was Secretary General in Áras an Uachtaráin to President Mary McAlee. So he has a remarkable career. And most recently, among other things, he is chairman of the Gathering. And it's in that context that Tim is here to speak this morning, to give a general reflection on the way our relations with the Irish diaspora has gone. This is not an advocacy exercise. Tim has no, whatever opinions he has about how we should vote on these matters, he's keeping them to himself. So could I invite Tim to talk to us?
Is an ormurdam velivan seo an achad an specialta in Mullach Ida. I'm from a place called Killeedy in West Limerick. Kill Ida. So I'm very, very pleased because the Ida in Mullach Ida is also Ita from our home place in West Limerick. So I feel right at home. Fascinating to be here. I just wanted to echo, as an outsider coming to the convention for the first time, echo Richard Humphrey's comments that as a citizen, just want to say what fantastic work you're doing here and really important work for the rest of us. We're following it with great interest at this very particular time in the decade of centenaries and as we head towards Ireland at 100. And I'd just like to add my words of thanks and good wishes for everything. So Tom, the chairman, kindly asked me to say a few words about, on a personal basis, and I'd now like to suggest how I want to recommend that you vote. Oh, sorry, Tom, no, I promised I wouldn't. Be very afraid of retired civil servants. Dangerous people. No, I promise, Tom, I'm back on message. I suppose the first thing I want to say about immigration is, for all of us, I think I can speak, and certainly for me, immigration is personal. I'm the eldest of a family of 12 in West Limerick, Killeedy, and I grew up in the 50s, 60s. Immigration was all around us, but it was so all-pervasive that we didn't even realise that that's what it was. My father had 4 siblings. 3 of the 4 emigrated, 2 to England, 1 to Australia, never returned. My grandfather's, Tom Kelleher, his brother Dan Kelleher, emigrated to America, 1915, never returned. And so and my first kind of more conscious sort of sense of something different going on here was in Cronan's Hall, Killeedy, one night in the late 50s, when I saw a play by John B. Cain called Many Young Men of 20. And it's called Hello and Welcome to the Reality. That was followed, the next kind of moment for me in a sense was 1960 as an 8-year-old following the election of one of our great diasporans, John F. Kennedy, and our teacher in the school in West Limerick, the late Willie Fitzmaurice, he drew a map of America on the board for us, and overnight he would colour in the states that had gone overnight to Nixon and those that had gone to Kennedy. And as an 8-year-old, I couldn't wait to get into school the next morning because it took a few days in those days. What happened overnight? And that was kind of the start of my own political consciousness. And then 3 years later, as an 11-year-old, stand with my mouth open in the rest of the country watching John F. Kennedy among us for 4 days. And then 5 months later, listening to Charles Mitchell telling us he's gone. And all the time, in fact, something very, very powerful actually happening in terms of of something that only later on I discovered the word is called diaspora. And then off I went to school, went to Maynooth, went off, joined the civil service, and ended up in foreign affairs. And then a great privilege, started working on Northern Ireland in 1986, and some of the people in this room I've had the privilege to work with. And there I saw at first hand another dimension of the complexity, some of which you've been dealing with here this morning in your fascinating discussion, and about identity and about what it means, and Irish, not Irish, and of course then the role of Irish America and the Irish from Britain in the peace process as well. And along the way I came across a man who became a great friend, Paddy O'Hanlon. And in 2001, when I was working as the Joint Secretary of the North-South Ministerial Council, I was the person the department asked to approach Paddy O'Hanlon to become the chairman of the task force on immigrants, which Brian Cowan set up as minister. And that turned out to be a seminal moment in terms of the modern iteration of our relationship with the diaspora. And Paddy and his colleagues on the task force spent a year, the following year, travelling around the world doing tremendous work, and the outcome of that was the task force report leading to the creation of the Irish Abroad Unit, and in subsequent over the years to the creation of Farmly. And one other thing just to say here, because it's controversial, the relationship between the home place and diaspora is complex, but one of the things that came out of that task force and at the setting up of the Irish Abroad Unit was the creation of the Immigrant Support Programme in about 2003, which has dispersed in the last 10 years about 100 million euros of taxpayers' money in supporting Irish immigrant groups around the world. And back to me personally, then my two postings kind of really framed the issue for me. This time 20 years ago, I was working in the embassy in Washington, so I saw at first hand the power of Capitol Hill, political Irish. And then in 2005, the game changer, moving from Armagh to New York, or as I said, moving from the Orchard County to the Big Apple. But look, I mean, it worked at the time. Thanks, Alban. Basically, that was for me the game changer, because that's where I discovered that the immigrant relationship, immigrant is energy. And if the relationship between diaspora and Ireland is energy, then New York is nuclear. And at first hand, I saw the extraordinary contribution that the Irish have made to that city, that place, and then the power of the connection to us. And I kind of left with a sense of, my God, this is something huge for us. And I had to confess, I didn't have a full sense of it as I needed to have. Followed then working with President McAleese for the next few years, which was a brilliant experience, somebody hugely committed to the relationship. And out of that, I was part of the discussions which eventually led to I say, the creation of the Global Irish Economic Forum. And by the time I left, I took slightly early retirement 3 years ago, set up my own business, and now working voluntarily a number of things as well. But I took with me that by then, my sort of interest in immigration and the diaspora had turned into fascination, and some would say obsession. And I just very briefly, because Tom is watching the clock now, but just in a sense, before I go talk about the gathering, one of the pieces I left New York with is like, we need to think a bit more about the immigrant and what is an immigrant. And an immigrant is somebody who leaves the home place, who plucks up their roots from their past, their heritage, their community, their tradition, and lands in a new world and plants and face the future. So what? So what's the big deal about that? That's a huge big deal. And The Economist had a feature on migrants in 2011. It said, the heading was "The Magic of Diasporas: How Migrant Networks Are Reshaping the World." And in that, it had stats about the number of immigrants in the world. And it's 3%. 3% of the world live in countries other than which they were born today. But that tells you another thing. That means that 97% of us live in the countries in which we were born. So for me, the immigrant is an incredibly powerful being. And the other question that it raises in the Irish context is why this extraordinary continued connection to the home place. And here's my sort of, and now with all sort of asking for the, if you like, the indulgence of the professionals here, because to me, actually, in amateur psychology terms, I think it has to do with the nature of nature of Irish society as historically a communal society. I asked Brondan O'Kelly, our new Consul General in New York, who's a Gael Goer, so while freshen, put a number, Brondan, on the length of time that Irish was spoken unbroken on the island of Ireland, and until the 1800s. And he said about 2,500 years. So I think 2,500 years of a communal, cohesive society with our own language. And then obviously the complexities of the 1600, we'll leave it at that, entered. And then in the 1800s, two fundamental events, the famine and the loss of the language, which broke all of that apart. And so my amateur psychology point is that 160 years since that is probably not enough to alter the fundamental DNA of the Irish as a communal people. And therefore, the breaking apart of that through immigration has led to a kind of a psychic loss for both sides, which we are still yearning, and all its complexities. And then the other thing I would say, and some of this morning in the debate, is, of course, there are many different strands as well, so you cannot talk about the diaspora, I think, in just one piece. Tom is watching the clock for us. I just wanted two quick projects I want to tell you about, which I think really underline the power of this in the modern era, and that's the Gathering and Connect Ireland. So I'm chairman of the Gathering, the advisory board of the Gathering, and it's been an absolutely fantastic project, and I think a good exemplar of government working with the community in a very powerful way. Because actually, the number of gatherings registered on our website at the moment, about 5,000 gatherings organised by people all around the country. And so, in fact, as my little soundbite is that the Gathering began as a government initiative, but it has become a people's project. And an extraordinary job being done by everybody involved, from Jim Miley and the team at Fáilte Ireland, Tourism Ireland. The county councils have played a great role, and then a number of private sector people like Irish public bodies who put €1 million into the community fund. But the key here, the heroes of this project are the people of Ireland, actually, and what they've done. It has led to a 7% increase in numbers, tourism numbers, at a very difficult time for a critical industry, and a 20% increase from visitor numbers from the States, which is terrific. But actually, the huge dividend in community terms around the country is also hugely powerful. And there are 4 key learnings for me out of the Gathering, actually. One is that, and this is a kind of a bit of a shocker, because actually, in fact, up to the time of the Gathering, I saw that my focus was really on out there, the extraordinariness of Irish America, the Irish in Britain, and so on. But in fact, actually, if the centre of gravity of the relationship between Ireland and its diaspora rests not out there, but actually here at home. Why? Because we who live in Ireland are the holders of the shared home place and heritage. We hold the home farm. It is we, not they, who get to decide what the notice on the gate says, whether it says keep out, don't care, or welcome home. And so in order for the relationship to go to a new level, we, the holders of the home place, must be prepared to become custodians of the shared home place. And I think the Gathering has proven the people of Ireland are absolutely up for custodianship. And so what's happened this time, instead of it being like as in the plays of Tom Murphy, which we've seen the Abbey Fiachas here, where in fact the relationship has been depicted as an entirely fractious one, and it has in many ways. Now we're turning around and we're saying, we, the home place, are saying, we invite you, we welcome you, we host you, we celebrate you. And the second learning is that diaspora policy, if it's to be meaningful, must actually be embraced by the people. So in a sense, the Gathering is actually the democratization of diaspora, and the people have shown they're up for it. And the third thing I'd say is diaspora needs to be inclusive. One of the challenges I faced along the way was one night I was challenged by a French person living in Ireland who came up to me and said, your Gathering is interesting, but I've been living in Ireland for 15 years. I have an Irish wife and 2 Irish children, and your Gathering is inward-looking and insular, and it doesn't include me. So I said, hello, Pascal. And that was the beginning that was Pascal Derian, who's become a great friend. And in fact, of course, the number of people who, the first thing he sent me was an abstract from the census of 2011, which showed the percentage of the people of Ireland who were born overseas in 2011. And the answer was 17%, which I found a shocker. So I have a new soundbite now. So the 70 million around the world and 17%. So you could say, therefore, that the 70 million are Irish by blood, and the 17% are Irish by choice. And so I think that's a hugely powerful piece of it well. And obviously the issue of Northern Ireland, and that's another dimension, the complexity. But this journey of diaspora needs to be inclusive. And then I think if we do all of that, I think we could be on the cusp here of a really powerful new paradigm in the relationship between Ireland and the diaspora as we face into Ireland at 100, whereby we, the home place, become custodians of the shared home place and heritage of the inclusive global Irish. And they, in their turn, then, become our pathfinders and supporters and allies in a complex global world. And all of that, so that could be, so based on a relationship of mutuality and meaningfulness. And I'm not for a second saying that, that this is a sugar-coated, fluffy thing. Immigration and having to leave and having to start in a new world will always be painful and difficult for those who leave and those who are left behind, particularly in the Irish context. But we have a chance now in a globalized world to turn it to something on an entirely new basis and very, very powerful, all of which is just a short hop from economic advantage. And one of the projects I'm involved with was called Connect Ireland, whereby we are mobilizing that 70 million global diaspora to become connectors to companies looking for a European base. And that's now a public-private, working with the IDA. Terry Clune is the private sector person funding it, the company Taxback. And I've been talking to some of you in the room about it. But the last 4 announcements of Connect Ireland out of precisely this project is 70 jobs in Kells, 50 jobs in Portarlington, 15 jobs in Kinvara, and 10 in Longford. So the whole relationship with the diaspora has the possibility as well then to turn it into something very, very powerful economically. And I'm coming to a finish, Tom. I think the other piece I would say in terms of my own learnings along the way is that the criticalness of culture in this journey, that culture is the oxygen that binds us, all strands of Irishness, and that culture is the lamp that illuminates who we are and what we are. And so I think it's brilliant that you're having this debate here. It's brilliant that the Constitutional Convention is around this. I think it's fantastic that we have a project like The Gathering, because I would say that we are at the highest point historically in the 91 years of statehood, in terms of around the issue. And I'm going to close with 2 quotes. One is from Liam Ryan, the former professor of sociology, legendary professor of sociology in Maynooth, who said, are you ready? Immigration is a mirror in which the Irish nation can always see its true face. Immigration is a mirror in which the Irish nation can always see its true face, meaning, for me anyway, that we can actually only define ourselves, both sides, by reference to each other, that's how powerful it is. And then the final one I would say is that one of the powers of what we are doing in your deliberations here as the home place in many ways is that actually it also serves as a mark of respect to every single person who had to pack a suitcase and leave, or to put it in John B. Kane's idiom, a mark of respect to every single one of the many young men and women of 20 who had to say goodbye. Thank you.